Ever since we moved to this quaint suburb, Jenna's eyes had sparkled with a different light. She found her haven in an exclusive book club, a sanctuary for avid readers like herself. Initially, it seemed like a blessing. She'd return from the meetings with a vibrant energy, her laughter filling our home like music. But as months rolled by, I noticed subtle changes. She'd whisper on the phone, smile secretively at text messages, and our conversations, they just dwindled. One night, she came home past midnight, her eyes dodging mine. The discussion went late. Love, she murmured, her voice a hushed escape. My heart wanted to believe her, but my mind, it churned with doubts. I decided to follow her the next time she left for the club. The evening air was crisp as I trailed her car from a safe distance. She drove to the heart of the city, parking outside an old Victorian building, its walls echoing stories of a bygone era. The place didn't look like any book club I'd ever seen. Through the dimly lit windows, I could see silhouettes, people moving with an odd familiarity. I slipped in quietly, finding a spot behind a row of antique bookshelves. My heart raced as I peered through the gaps. There she was, my Jenna, her eyes locked with a man I'd never seen. They spoke in hushed tones, their hands touching briefly, a gesture so intimate it clawed at my chest. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of truth I had just witnessed. As I prepared to confront them, a sudden commotion erupted. The group gathered around something, their voices a mix of shock and excitement. I strained to see, but before I could understand, Jenna's eyes met mine across the room. Time stood still, her expression a tangled web of fear and surprise. I retreated hastily, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. What was this place? Who was that man? And most importantly, what was Jenna hiding? Outside, the cold night air felt harsh against my skin, a stark contrast to the fire burning in my chest. I knew then this was just the beginning. There were secrets lurking in the shadows of that book club, secrets that threatened to shatter the life I thought we had. As I drove back home, a single haunting question echoed in my mind. What happens next? Like, share and subscribe if you're hooked and can't wait to uncover the secrets of the double life of a book club. The next few days were a blur. My mind kept replaying that night, each memory a shard piercing through my heart. Jenna's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She was on edge, her eyes darting nervously whenever her phone buzzed. It was as if she was guarding a sinister secret, one that could crumble our world. I had to know more. I couldn't let this gnawing suspicion eat away at me. So I decided to delve deeper into the mystery of the book club. My first stop was the local library. If this club was as exclusive as Jenna claimed, someone there must have heard about it. The librarian, a kindly old woman with a penchant for mystery novels, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the club. Ah, that club, she said, a note of caution in her voice. It's not what it appears to be. They're a selective bunch, not just anyone can join. Her words were cryptic, but they fueled my resolve. That evening, as Jenna prepared for another meeting, I feigned exhaustion and retreated to our bedroom. As soon as I heard the car pull away, I sprang into action. Dressed in dark clothing, I headed back to the Victorian building, determination my silent companion. I crept in unnoticed, finding a new hiding spot. The group was already gathered, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of antique lamps. I strained to listen, catching fragments of conversations that made no sense. They weren't discussing books, they were planning something. Something big. My heart pounded as I watched Jenna. She seemed different here, more alive, more dangerous. The man from before was there too, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. A surge of jealousy and anger washed over me, but I forced myself to stay focused. Suddenly, the room went silent. A new figure had entered, someone I couldn't quite see. The group huddled around, listening intently. The air was thick with anticipation. I leaned in closer, desperate to catch their words. That's when disaster struck. A bookshelf I was leaning against gave way with a loud crash, sending books tumbling down. All eyes turned towards me, shock and recognition mirrored in Jenna's eyes. I scrambled to my feet, my cover blown. The group advanced towards me, their expressions a mix of anger and curiosity. Jenna's voice cut through the chaos. He's my husband. The room fell silent. The mysterious figure stepped forward, his identity sending shockwaves through my very being. It was David, Jenna's ex-fiancé, whom she had often mentioned in passing, always with a hint of unresolved emotions. His presence sent 1,000 questions racing through my mind. Why was he here? And what role did he play in Jenna's secret life? The room was thick with tension, each person waiting for the other to break the silence. David's eyes were fixed on me, a mixture of amusement and challenge in his gaze. "So you're the husband Jenna can't stop talking about," he said, his voice smooth, yet laced with something sinister. Jenna stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Let's talk outside," she whispered, grabbing my arm. I followed, numb and confused. Outside, under the starless sky, Jenna's facade crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she began to unravel the truth. The book club was a front, a gathering of individuals bound by a shared past and a dangerous secret. David, their charismatic leader, had lured Jenna back into his world. A world she thought she had escaped when she left him for a simpler, honest life with me. The club? It's not just about books or affairs, Jenna sobbed. It's much bigger. We're planning to expose a massive corporate scandal. One that David and I uncovered years ago. But we needed a group, a cover, and I got pulled back in. I was stunned. The betrayal I had imagined was of a different kind. A deeper dissection that entangled Jenna in a web of danger and moral dilemmas. David's plan was to use the club as a cover to leak the scandal to the press. But the stakes were high. Anyone involved was at risk. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice a mix of anger and hurt. "I wanted to protect you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could keep my two worlds separate. But I was wrong." The weight of her confession hung heavy between us. I was torn between the love for my wife and the shock of her double life. Just then a black car pulled up. Its windows rolled down, revealing a face that sent a chill down my spine. It was. In the car sat Mr. Hargrove, the CEO of the corporation entangled in the scandal Jenna and David were trying to expose. His cold, calculating eyes bore into us, sending a wave of dread through my body. How did he find us? The implications were terrifying. "Jenna, we need to talk." Hargrove's voice was calm, but there was an underlying threat that couldn't be ignored. Jenna stiffened, her resolve faltering under his gaze. He stepped out of the car, his presence dominating. "You're playing a dangerous game. I suggest you and your little group reconsider your actions," he said, his eyes flickering to me, assessing. Jenna gathered her courage, her voice steady. "We won't be intimidated. The truth needs to come out." Hargrove chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Be careful, Jenna. You're not the only one with something to lose." With a final piercing look, he got back into his car and drove away. The encounter left us shaken. Jenna clung to me, her body trembling. "What have I gotten us into?" she whispered. We drove home in silence, the night's events weighing heavily on us. Once home, Jenna revealed everything. The club, under David's leadership, had been working to compile irrefutable evidence of Hargrove's corrupt practices. Jenna's role had been to help decode complex financial documents, thanks to her background in finance. "But why involve your ex?" I asked, the jealousy and confusion evident in my voice. Jenna sighed. "David was the one who discovered the scandal initially. We had to work together despite our past. It was never about rekindling anything with him." I wanted to believe her, but the sting of betrayal, real or perceived, was hard to shake off. The next day, as I grappled with the revelations, I received an anonymous email. It contained a single file marked urgent. Hesitantly, I opened it and found myself staring at a detailed report of Hargrove's illicit activities, along with a note. "Expose him, or more than your marriage is at stake." The gravity of the situation was now undeniable. We were in too deep, caught in a dangerous game where the stakes were life and death. As I pondered our next move, a sudden knock at the door jolted me. I opened it to find, standing at the door was a stern-faced man I didn't recognize, his eyes scanning the room behind me with an unsettling intensity. "I need to speak with Jenna," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for questions. As Jenna approached, her face paled upon seeing him. "Detective Miller," she greeted, her voice a shaky whisper. The detective's presence was ominous, hinting at trouble far beyond our fears. Detective Miller wasted no time. "We've been monitoring Hargrove and his associates, including your book club," he began, his eyes fixed on Jenna. "You're dangerously close to a situation that's much larger than a corporate scandal." Jenna and I exchanged worried glances. The detective's revelation meant our actions were no longer hidden in the shadows. They were under the scrutiny of law enforcement. Miller continued, "We can offer protection, but in exchange we need everything you have on Hargrove. And we need your cooperation to bring him down." The offer was a lifeline amidst the chaos. Jenna nodded, the burden of her secret life finally lifting. She agreed to work with the detective, promising to deliver the evidence the next day. After Miller left, Jenna and I had a long heart-to-heart conversation. It was time to lay all cards on the table, to rebuild the trust that had been strained by secrets and lies. We vowed to face the coming storm together. The next morning, as we prepared to hand over the evidence to Detective Miller, an encrypted message popped up on Jenna's phone. It was from David, urgent and foreboding. "Meet me immediately. It's about Hargrove. Don't bring the evidence." Jenna's eyes met mine, a storm of uncertainty swirling in them. We knew meeting David could be a trap, but what if he had critical information? With heavy hearts, we decided to split up. Jenna would meet David while I would deliver the evidence to Detective Miller. It was a risk, but one we felt compelled to take. As I drove towards the police station, my mind raced with possibilities. Meanwhile, Jenna headed to an old warehouse, the designated meeting spot. When I handed the evidence to Miller, his grim expression did little to ease my anxiety. "We'll handle it from here," he said. "Go home and wait for Jenna." But Jenna didn't come home. Hours passed, and her phone went straight to voicemail. A sinking feeling took hold of me. Something was terribly wrong. Rushing to the warehouse, my worst fears materialized. The place was deserted. A single piece of paper lying in the center of the room. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a note from David. "You should have trusted me, not the police. Jenna's gone, and it's your fault." Panic coursed through me as I stared at the note. Jenna was missing, and I was clueless about her whereabouts. David's betrayal stung deep, but there was no time to dwell on it. I had to find Jenna. Racing back home, I called Detective Miller, but it went to voicemail. Desperation mounting, I started piecing together every clue, every conversation that might lead me to Jenna. Then it struck me, the book club. Perhaps someone there knew where David might have taken her. I headed back to the Victorian building, the place where this tangled web began. The members were gathered, their faces etched with concern and confusion. Upon seeing me, they fell silent. "I need to find Jenna," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "David has taken her, and I believe he's planning something drastic." The group exchanged glances, the tension palpable. Then one of them, a woman named Lisa, stepped forward. "I think I know where they might be," she said hesitantly. "David mentioned a safe house once, a place he used when things got complicated." Grasping onto this sliver of hope, I followed Lisa to a secluded cabin hidden deep in the woods. The place looked abandoned, but a faint light flickered through the windows. We approached cautiously, the silence of the woods eerie and foreboding. As we reached the door, muffled voices seeped through. I recognized Jenna's voice, her tone frantic. Bursting through the door, I was met with a scene that chilled me to the bone. Jenna was bound to a chair, her eyes wide with fear. David stood over her, a crazed look in his eyes. In his hand was a flash drive, likely containing copies of the evidence against Hargrove. "Stop this, David," I yelled, my heart pounding. David turned, a twisted smile on his face. "You don't understand, do you? This was never just about exposing Hargrove. It's bigger than that, and Jenna, she's the key." Before he could continue, the sound of sirens pierced the air. The police, led by Detective Miller, swarmed the cabin. In the chaos, David made a break for it, clutching the flash drive. I lunged at him, and in the scuffle, the flash drive flew from his grasp and slid under a nearby cabinet. The police apprehended David, and I rushed to Jenna, untying her. Her relief at being safe was palpable, but our victory was short-lived. As the police searched the cabin, a disturbing discovery was made. Hidden in a concealed compartment were documents and evidence linking not only Hargrove but also high-ranking officials in a web of corruption far more extensive than we had imagined. Detective Miller approached us, his expression grave. "You two have unearthed a conspiracy that goes to the very top. You're not safe. We need to get you into protective custody immediately." As we were escorted out, I glanced back at the cabin. The flash drive still lay hidden, its secrets untapped. But for now, Jenna and I had a more pressing concern: staying alive. As Detective Miller ushered us into the back of an unmarked police car, the reality of our situation sank in. We were now key witnesses in a case that reached the highest echelons of power. Fear and uncertainty clouded my thoughts, but Jenna's hand in mine was a comforting anchor. We were taken to a secure location, a nondescript house in a quiet neighborhood. Miller briefed us on the situation. "You two have kicked the hornet's nest. We need to keep you under the radar until the trial. It's not just about Hargrove anymore. There are others, powerful people who will do anything to keep this quiet." The days turned into weeks as we lived in our protective bubble. We had each other, but the isolation was stifling. We were cut off from the world, with only occasional visits from Detective Miller bringing updates and supplies. One evening, as we sat discussing our future, Miller arrived with news. "We've been through the evidence you provided. It's solid, but without the flash drive, our case isn't airtight. We need that final piece to bring the whole house of cards down." The flash drive. It was still hidden in the cabin. A plan began to form in my mind. I knew it was risky, but it was a risk we had to take. With Miller's reluctant agreement, we devised a covert operation to retrieve the drive. Under the cover of darkness, we returned to the cabin. The place was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of our last visit. I slipped inside, my heart racing. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence. I found the cabinet and retrieved the flash drive, a small object holding so much power. Just as I was about to leave, a sudden noise startled me. Footsteps outside. I peeked through the window and saw shadowy figures approaching. We weren't alone. Quickly, I signaled to Jenna and Miller, and we hid in the shadows. The figures entered the cabin, their flashlights sweeping the room. They were searching for something, the flash drive. Realizing the danger, we carefully made our way out, avoiding detection. Once we were a safe distance away, Miller radioed for backup. The drive was the key to exposing the conspiracy, but we knew those implicated wouldn't stop coming after us. As we made our way back to the safe house, a new sense of determination settled over us. We were no longer just survivors. We were fighters, ready to bring the truth to light. Back at the safe house, with the flash drive securely in our possession, a sense of urgency enveloped us. Detective Miller wasted no time. He arranged for a team of experts to analyze the drive, uncovering a trove of incriminating evidence that implicated not just Hargrove but a network of corruption linking politics, finance, and the corporate world. As the trial date approached, the tension was palpable. Jenna and I were key witnesses, the linchpin in a case that could topple giants. We prepared for the courtroom, going over our testimonies, aware that every word carried immense weight. The day of the trial arrived, a day that felt more like a lives. The courthouse was a fortress, swarming with media and security. As we made our way inside, flashes of cameras and shouted questions assaulted us, but we remained focused, our resolve unwavering. The trial was a whirlwind. Prosecutors presented the evidence with precision, painting a damning picture of Hargrove and his associates. When it was our turn to testify, Jenna and I took the stand, recounting our ordeal and the evidence we had uncovered. Our words echoed in the packed courtroom, every syllable a strike against the corrupt network we had exposed. As the trial progressed, the defense tried to discredit us, painting us as unreliable, involved for personal gain. But the evidence was irrefutable. The flash drive, in particular, was a silent testament to the truth, its contents a beacon of justice. After days of intense proceedings, the jury retired to deliberate. The wait was agonizing, each passing hour a test of our patience and courage. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The jury returned, their verdict clear in their somber expressions. Guilty. The word rang through the courtroom, a sweet sound of victory and relief. Hargrove and his county conspirators were found guilty on all counts. Justice had prevailed, but the journey was far from over. As we stepped out of the courthouse, free but forever changed, we knew our lives would never be the same. We had fought against giants and emerged victorious, but at a cost. Our normal life was a distant memory, replaced by a new reality shaped by our ordeal. Detective Miller approached us, a smile of genuine respect on his face. "You did good. Thanks to you, we've struck a significant blow against corruption. But be careful. People like Hargrove have long memories." As we walked away hand in hand, a mix of emotions flooded us, triumph, relief, but also a sense of wariness. We had exposed a deep-seated corruption, but in doing so, we had also made powerful enemies. Our story had reached its conclusion, but our lives were just beginning a new chapter, one where we had to be vigilant, always aware of the shadows cast by those we had brought to light.